All right. Hello, everyone. It's your girl, Gabrielle. Welcome to a brand new episode of Hot Topics. Let me tell you what this show is about. So, this is a show where we like to have real talk about real things. We like to talk about things in education, employment, mental health, physical health, all that mushy gushy stuff, but all with the purpose of educating you and teaching you something, and for you to be 1% better than how you were yesterday. So, my name is Gabrielle Crichlow, and let me tell you the topic of the show today. So, it's actually a repeat topic, but a brand new guest. So, let me tell you what that topic is today. So, the topic today that I am bringing back is having a child with a disability. So, this is the third time that I am bringing this topic back, having a child with a disability. So, I encourage you guys, check out our previous episodes, check out parts 1 and 2, so you can see the theme here. But this is the third time that I am bringing back this episode. And I have a guest with me who's going to sit on the hot seat. Her name is Sara Bradford. And let me tell you, so Sara Bradford, also known as S.J. Childs, she is an author of children's books on neurodiversity and inclusion. And she has a podcast, and she's an event host. And she focuses on bringing autistic voices to the community. Fabulous. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Sara to the forefront. Hey, Sara, how you doing?
Thank you so much for having me, Gabrielle. It's wonderful to be here today.
Thank you for coming on, and thank you for getting on the hot seat.
Absolutely. I don't have a problem with it at all.
So today we're talking about having a child with a disability. Your child has a disability, so I would love for you to talk to us about that and your experiences and all that
Yeah.
mushy gushy stuff.
Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely. And thank you, listeners and viewers who are here supporting Gabrielle and her show today. Thank you so much. And my name is Sara Bradford. My pen name, author name, and my host name is S.J. Childs. And that was born out of an idea to help the community and the children in my neighborhood better understand my two children with autism, dyslexia. And then I just decided while I was on my current journey to educate also about Down syndrome, anxiety, and physical differences. And so, in our journey, my son was diagnosed at the early age of 16 months old as autistic. At the time, I had no understanding or knowledge of autism. And I had been lucky to be a medical legal secretary. And so I took that experience and researched so much as I could in the 2010 ish timeframe. And so with that, I started to understand how I could better help my son, who at the time would basically hum, spin in circles, bump into things, and didn't make any eye contact. He had no speech. The incredible thing about him was that he could read, and that at age 1, he started to show me that he could read. And by the age of 2, he was still not speaking, but he was writing. And so we were able to start to communicate with him in a meaningful way through writing. And at the age of 3, we recognized that he had a photographic memory and he would go out in the world and is on car rides, I guess I should say. And when we'd come home, he'd write down the words of all the things he saw, whether they were names of stores, license plate, street names. And we started to realize that he had this unique ability to um, take in information. So, with my love of education and research and learning, I started on the path of understanding how to help him communicate with us better, how to help him navigate the tough parts of life, like a special diet that we chose to put him on that really, really helped with his speech and his what's known to be stimming, which was the humming, the spinning, and the kind of bumping into things. And when we did this special diet, we were able to see this whole new child emerge. And he did start speaking soon after that. Not that his speech was what we would call normal or typical. He still spoke in a sense of like riddles. And I oftentimes joke that I was the puzzle master because I would have to, kind of navigate his language and figure out what things meant. We started off getting early intervention when he was just 2 years old, before he even started speaking. And we were able to integrate things like play games, uh, ready, set, go, clap your hands, singing lots of preschool songs to start helping him engage with us. And it wasn't until he was about in preschool or kindergarten that he really started to show us his interests, again, academically. And he started to learn multiple languages through some of the educational tools that I had found for him. And by the age of 6, 7, going into first grade, the school told us that they no longer had programs that would be available to him, that they couldn't teach a first grader how to do algebra, which is where he was at on the scale, and that we would just have to find other help. And it was pretty devastating. It was isolating. It was hard to understand that the schools weren't going to help this brilliant child learn. You'd think that they would really want to be doing that because of that situation, but I ended up taking him home and homeschooling him for the next 6 years. And still today, he is 13. He is still semi-verbal, which means he doesn't speak like you and I possibly, but he does have the use of his voice and words and can communicate somewhat his needs and concerns and thoughts and ideas. He still struggles with things today like personal hygiene, his own executive functioning, like cleaning his space around him, or even sometimes if he misses something like an alarm that he sets on his phone, it will take him sometimes hours to get over it and to feel calm and not excuse me, not upset about the situation. So it's taken a lot of learning on our parts as parents. And right away, we realized that we have an older child that is an adult. So we realized right away when he was little that we couldn't parent the same way as we had this older sibling, and we were going to have to learn how to speak a better language for him, which meant no words like no, stop, don't, can't. Things like that made him have meltdowns, which then he would start self harming. So we right away had to put into action kind of language processing in our own ways as parents and as a couple, how we could better speak to him, to redirect him to not run in the street, things like that. And so we just had to kind of create our own language with him. He is um, out of high school at 13, and now we're on the journey of finding out what that looks like, whether we start by getting his GED or we go through an early college education program. But he's still, I say, as his mother and knowing him kind of socially and I would say, developmentally at the age of 10 to 13 still. He's still very young, and he does not have the social ability to interact with groups of people his own age, let alone in college setting. So it does come with a sense of difficulty. And, I do like to preface that autism is a disability only as it disables a person to its disability. So I'm autistic. Obviously, I don't struggle like my son. He has challenges that will continue to um, keep him from living maybe a normal or typical life. When he was little, doctors said he would never leave the house, he would never get a job, he would never go to college. Now he studies 130 languages. He's done calculus, physics, just math off the charts. And to me, I see a future for him that is going to be maybe a company that's been trained to accommodate his needs and supports, that he can give his all in coding for an IT company, or translating for the FBI. Who knows? I mean, there's unlimitless possibilities, but our society really needs to kind of catch up to where we need to be in terms of providing accommodations and assistance for that. So it's led me down this amazing journey. Our youngest child was also diagnosed at the age of 8. She presents extremely differently than her brother. She was talking very, very early on in very educated um, words. It's called the Gestalt language processing, and it's a form of processing where you learn words as phrases. So she would say things like, "It's warm inside." And that was the word cold. She would make up these long phrases that meant one word. And so it's just this interesting process of understanding how our brains work. And as a parent, you just want to show up and do the best for your kiddos. So I've been trying to do my best and teach them all that I can where they're at, and help them to thrive as individuals. And luckily, that's led me to these amazing opportunities: writing children's books, starting my podcast, as Gabrielle mentioned, doing events where I host all autistics that are brilliant celebrities and CEOs and professors, race car drivers, beauty pageant winners, just amazing individuals who've overcome what the doctors might have said as fortune tellers in the beginning, that they'd never amount to anything or leave the house. And I just really want to show what's possible when we believe in people and when we believe in the structures of society that we can change and we can support this new upcoming immersion of autistics at this time kind of in our life. I hope that was a good introduction.
Yes. Thank you. That was an amazing story, and you had such a journey. um, and I appreciate you telling your story. So, a few things to pick at. Um, so tell us about, so your son is older, right? And then your daughter?
13, yeah.
Your son is
2 years
firstborn.
older. Hmm.
Okay. So tell us about the moment when you decided to have him evaluated.
Yeah. Well, that's great that you brought that up and said so, because we were at just a regular pediatrician developmental kind of appointment. And my pediatrician said to me, "I think you should have him tested for autism." And I have to be honest and tell you, in that moment, I was so upset with the doctor. I was so upset because I didn't understand anything about autism. I was angry that he was not giving him credit for reading as a 1 year old. Like, I was seeing all of these amazing things, but the doctor was really seeing the whole picture. And I was only seeing a little tiny piece of it. And so I, in fact, went back after I had written one of the children's books about DJ. That's my son. I went back to his pediatrician, to that same doctor, and told him that exact thing, that I was so angry with you. I know it wasn't your fault. I absolutely appreciate you now. I gave him the book, and just said, thank you for starting me on this journey, because I can't imagine what it would have looked like in a world where he was treated poorly because nobody gave the intention of understanding him. So I'm really glad that but it was scary and overwhelming. I learned something along the way in that explaining the process of the diagnosis. And early on, in when I started, I would say, supporting parents or educating, I was using a phrase that I no longer use, and that was grieving. And I no longer tell parents or tell communities, like, I don't say it's okay to grieve. I mean, grieving is definitely a part of our lives that we do for certain things. But I learned through an interview of a young man who was diagnosed, and the same thing, his parents grieved over his diagnosis. I learned how hurt he was hearing those words, and how it affected him for his life and till today, thinking of how he could come into the world and bring such sorrow and grief to people. And that broke my heart, and it made me realize how gentle we really need to be with words in our society, and how even saying, having lived experience is giving a person that isn't living less kind of vitality than saying, this is my living experience, because I'm literally living it. It's not from somebody that's not living anymore. So I think just along this journey, learning how to be more sensitive when you are creating a platform for yourself and others to draw from information. And I'm sure you can understand this the same too, Gabrielle.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's important it's better to excuse me, it's better to know than not to know.
Yeah.
So, and especially because you yourself are autistic, um, so which leads me to ask you, were you aware of your own autism before your children, or
No.
did you find out after your children? Where did that play in?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. So my daughter was diagnosed, and in that process, looking at her and thinking, wow, she's this brilliant little girl who is, I think, so emotionally mature and just ahead of the game, like so ahead. And I saw myself in that child, and said, well, I remember stories of memorizing, Scorpion albums at the age of 3. These crazy things my neighbors would make me do. I was an only child, so I only had the stories from them to draw from. Um, but some amazing things I did as a little person, and realizing that, my kind of fascination with words and with writing and poetry, and how all of these things, I have extremely sensitive hearing, which is two parts. I have these little tiny ears. It's called outer ear microtia, which is just a genetic. It came from my mom's side, and my children as well have it. And in that is why I also wrote the book about physical differences, and how feeling different my whole life, I always thought it was just because I had little ears, and people through school and stuff called me little ears for years and years and years. And it's not like even a negative term or anything, but it's still, it wasn't Sara. It was a part of my body that was different from everyone else's. And it was always the topic, the first thing they said to me. And it started to just demean my experience and my how I felt about myself. And so I wanted to write this children's book for my kids to say, hey, everyone is different. Everyone is different. Like, and I did it in the form of cats, because I don't think there's two cats in the world that are the same. I don't know if you could find two cats that are the same. And I just really pointed out the fact that there's so many differences between them. They're all, at the end of the day, they're cats, and they all can, come together, no matter how many of them are different in different ways. And so, yeah, it's brought this whole experience has brought about all of these unique steps. And so at that point, I thought, well, how will I get myself tested? What will that process look like? And I did an interview with a woman who had gone to a wellness center and had a brain scan done. And in that process, found out that she had ADHD. I was kind of going through that, learning for herself what that meant and how she could better manage her executive functioning or the problems that she was having. She was here in my town, in Salt Lake City, Utah, and so I went to that same clinic and I said, I would like to get a brain scan. I want to know if I have autism, if I have ADHD. I know I have anxiety. If I have I kind of did this little checklist. And sure enough, it came back that I most definitely was autistic. I do have ADHD. I do have a little bit of dyslexia and some things that I wasn't even aware of that like autism. But it really was this amazing kind of wholeness that I was like, wow, I am part of something. Like I'm a child of divorced parents, and only child of divorced parents. So I never really felt that wholeness and that like togetherness and that part of something. And I think that having a family and um during a process when my son was about 8 years old and we were having his IQ tested, was when I pulled my husband aside and said, you are definitely on the spectrum. Like, I'm seeing all these things matching up here now. And I know it's you. I know that it's, you're also on the spectrum. And so it was kind of like son, husband, daughter, me. And we went through this thing, and we just kind of rejoiced that we could understand one another, that we could be more patient and supportive to one another. And maybe not our children, because they're still in this growing process, but my husband and I, who have been 20 years together now, we've never felt closer to one another. And it just brought this sense of unity and this sense of understanding. And now I'm, kind of coming from this space where I can tell people, yeah, when I was little, I had this sensitive hearing that I thought was from having the little ears. Now I know that it's sensory processing, that my hearing is extra sensitive, that I hear 1 second longer in each ear than typical humans, which also has frequency variations. It's very complex, but it really is interesting to then understand. Okay, well, maybe the volume control that seems to be something that is in an autistic trait could be the sensitivity of the hearing. And I was just in a panel just yesterday morning where it was actually dinner time in Rwanda. And I was speaking to these parents at this autism school who are just now learning and understanding and trying to support their kiddos. And in their country and community, they have little to no resources or education. We're so lucky here in the US. And in that process, having them ask questions and being able to think about it in the sense of me as a parent and me as myself and how I could better help them understand their children better without seeing their children in person, and really understanding them. So it's brought these opportunities for me to globally scale my connections, um, that unity. I don't even no longer even I know that I have even more than just my little family. I have my community here in Utah. I have my community in the US. I have my global community now. And it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever felt a part of.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And it's like, it sounds like it's an awakening for you
Yeah.
because I mean, first it started with your son, and your doctor surprised you and said, you should have him tested. It sounds like you threw a fit, and but then I guess it just, you let it marinate and let it sink in, and you decided to go through with it, and boom, autism. And then here comes your daughter, she's showing her own, um is symptoms the right word?
Yeah,
um
traits, I would say, maybe.
Traits,
Yeah.
yeah. So she started showing her own traits, and you decide to, have her evaluated. And then, excuse me, and then you, looking at your daughter, realize, hey, she's doing the same things I do. Let me check myself out. And then, boom, and then you go over to your husband and say, you got a little something, something. You should have yourself checked out. And then, boom, so it's like the dominoes are falling. You knock one over, and the rest start to fall. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I would say. And I think other people, it's so hard to say. Families are all so very different, and there's not a concrete answer as to why, autism numbers are 1 in 36, as, 50s to 60, 70 years ago, they were 1 in 100,000. And so it is definitely, there's no like one size fits all answer for it. But if I'm allowed to share my personal opinion, noted that I am not a doctor or a scientist, but I am a smart little cookie. And what I have really found in all of my processes of researching and understanding the biology and the neurology of autism is that in the process of changing our soil in like the 1960s, in I think, and I don't really know much about this, so I'll be very careful about just saying it a little tiny bit, but maybe even generational vaccines, like things we don't even know that grandma got, that stay in the bloodstream, stay in the body, and that can create the same types of symptoms, if you will. So there's many different ideas, but I think over time our brains have evolved, and just like the human body and animals and everything that has happened over millions of years of evolution of things, I think that that's happened also to our bodies and to our brains. And whether it was the pesticides that grandma's farm got, that then were in all of the fruits and vegetables that mom ate, that then were passed on, and now our bodies have to function differently when they're introduced with different toxins. They have to react, and they have to know how to kind of change things. So I really see like this evolution of the brain has come about, and that's why I think the numbers are so high. I don't think that it's something like that was in the water. Well, maybe so, right? But over time, not like immediately that has happened. I think that it's really been this expression over time that's happened. And I don't know, that's just my personal hot seat opinion there.
It's hot topics, girl. This is the show to have those opinions.
Yeah.
Um, So if you don't mind, I want to go back to your son and when you first decided to have him evaluated. So
Yeah.
the doctor told you you should have him tested and you flipped out. I want to tap into that emotion.
Yeah.
So what was it about what the doctor said that made
Mm.
you lose your cool?
Yeah. I guess because at the time, autism to me was maybe what Rain Man looked like, or in somebody that was institutionalized that rocked back and forth, which I did see my son doing. So I think it brought up a lot of fear. I think that I was living in that moment and maybe in the next few months in this fear based thought process where I was just afraid of everything, afraid of how were we going to survive. Like I wasn't going to be able to work anymore. Like if I had to stay home, my career was done. I was done being anything, right? And so these ideas of fear were just like all that we were living off of basically. And I would say it took maybe 2 or 3 months to kind of understand that how we were thinking wasn't helping him. All of the research about what, how could this have happened or what caused this or any of those kind of initial thoughts that I had weren't supporting him, weren't going to help him on his journey. Like I had to change my focus and I had to change my intent as a parent to not put on the who can I blame and where can I look to, for that as more of, okay, what do I need to do now? Like, what are the steps I take? Like, he's my child. He's in my home. I have to set up the right environment for him now. Um, I didn't have I had 2 people in my life at the time. One, just a close friend that worked at a Jewish community center, and she worked with children and had ADHD herself and was, like, "It's okay, Sarah. It doesn't change who he is. He's DJ. He's always gonna be himself. Like, this doesn't change." But it was those types of helpful conversations with people that loved me that helped me get over the shock of, well, how do I help this kiddo now? There's no resources in the community. There's no like general understanding. It was just so everything felt so small and isolated at that time. Like there was nowhere to reach out for help. And I had remembered have been married before and no kids or anything out of that marriage, but my ex sister in law had a daughter with autism. And so she was kind of my lifeline. I reached out to her and said, well, I don't understand. What do I do now? Like, what are my next steps? And she gave me some information and kind of places to lean on and to look on the internet and things like that. And in one of those places was a doctor who was helping kiddos with their diet and showing changes when you changed the gut brain barrier in the diet changes, then it also reduced or even completely took out um, some of the non-speaking symptoms and that we had talked about, or even some of the stimming habits, which are the behaviors. And I tried to be very cognizant that I researched everything, that I didn't just take one thing and just run with it, that I really, really researched. So when this diet change to take out gluten and dairy was brought to me, I didn't just jump on it or believe it or think, yeah, some doctor said so, so I'm going to go for it. I had medical uh, legal secretary experience. I knew I needed to like get some facts lined up. And so I really researched, well, what is gluten and what is casein? And found out that they're both proteins, one in cow's milk and one in wheat, that both can cause inflammation. And after understanding that process and at deciding, okay, we're going to remove the casein, which was the milk products, from his diet. I think he was like 3.5 at the time. In the first week, and I love Facebook for Facebook memories because I can actually go back and see the accounts of this that happened. In about a week of taking the milk out of his system, like I had said previously at the beginning of the story, he had been reading. So I knew he had all of this vocabulary in his brain. And within 7 days, he had said up to 50 words: gorilla, camera, escalator, like these crazy words that didn't mean anything, but were just words that he was finally able to say. What I understood at that moment was that this protein was causing inflammation in his brain, making his wiring, his synapses not being able to connect properly to process into the speech processing center those things that he could think but not say. And we kept him on the casein free diet. He still is today. But we didn't take the gluten out for about 8 weeks. We waited quite some time to kind of like let those changes set in. And then we removed gluten. That was the harder, more trickier part of doing it, because almond milk, my kids loved it, never had a problem with it. So getting off of milk was easy. Now, getting off of Cheerios and the cookies and the bread that he loved and goldfish crackers and everything else under the sun that has gluten was so difficult. But we took him off the gluten, and in about probably 2 to 3 weeks from removing the gluten products and, trying to replace them with other types of crackers and breads and such, the stimming, which was the flapping, spinning, humming, all of those stopped. All of those behaviors stopped. No longer did we have this child that we had to pad his room from him running into the walls, but he was sitting still, talking, working on his computer. He still wasn't socially aware or cognizant of like his surroundings, things like that. Danger, he has really no sense of danger, which is terribly frightening. But it changed our lives in the way that he was then able to communicate through spoken word. And also, I think that in the process of learning about the gluten, again, understanding the inflammation it was causing his stomach was making him spin circles and push himself into things to get rid of his stomach ache. And after I thought about it in hindsight, I was like, of course, that makes so much sense. All of this inflammation was causing these problems for him. And so on this journey, I've just had to really look a lot at how his body reacts differently than typical bodies. And so when I take him to specialists and doctors, they naturally give me information that they would for a typical person or child, but things don't always work out because that's not the case for him. And so it's just really a learning process of how to get the best information. We did ABA therapy in our home for years and years, and some of it was not, it wasn't ever traumatic for him, but some of it just didn't give him what he needed. Like, how to say the word dog wasn't something he needed to work on. He was doing, algebra and speaking Spanish. Like he needed to be pushed in other ways than they were wanting him to show up. So when we found therapists that would play with him and get down on the floor with him and talk to him about his special interests, that's when he emerged as a person and started to realize that maybe there was some importance to this forming relationships. So it's definitely still a journey, still a process, but I'm now trying to start a nonprofit. I've actually in the process of starting my own nonprofit to help create training programs and programs for autistics in the employment industry because I think it's like 80% of autistics are either or underemployed. So it's devastating for the future of, of hope and things like that. But that's why I'm like trying to be so locked into this community and do all the changing that I can in the world. So when he gets to that point, he'll have a place to be.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And you said a lot there. You talked about, changing your son's diet, which is interesting to me, because I think I also heard that before, like ADHD, autism, cut out the dairy, cut out the gluten, which is tough for me because I love dairy and I love gluten. So, but that's it's interesting that the type of foods you know that people eat can affect their
Yeah.
brain activity, and taking those things out, you see an improvement. So I think that's it's interesting
Oh,
to
bodies
hear.
are fascinating, aren't they?
Yeah, and then just hearing you talk, it's like I'm just picturing your journey, how you started from completely freaking out about autism and having all these fears. And I'm wondering if it was because of your own upbringing and how you were picked on, and you had all these fears about your son being picked on, and then you just
Yeah.
kind of embraced it, accepted it, and then you just kind of just brought yourself down to a point of now you're like an advocate. So you
Mm.
went from completely freaking out to a champion. So
Thank you. Yeah.
you went through this whole transformation.
So true. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
it's so interesting, and I don't know about you for podcasting. This has nothing to do with autism, but just a side note about podcasting. I think that, there was a certain time where we were homeschooling and it was so isolating and I never talked to anybody. I just sat in my sweatpants and ponytail and watched Love Island episodes 567 times, and so it was just like this, oh, I think I'm in a depression. I think something's wrong. And in the process of having written the books and going on to some podcasts, somebody said, you should start your own podcast. And of course, it was terrifying, as you well probably know when you first started. It's just this new experience you're jumping into. But the amount of self love it created for me is unbelievable, undeniable. Like, I became a whole new Sara after that. Um, I was able to speak my voice, become a louder part of the community, which I really wanted to do. I really wanted to speak up and just bring people together, connect people, and getting ready. Even the simplest thing is curling my hair and getting ready and feeling good about myself, and kind of that shift where you go from, oh, I'm so afraid to being on camera, to being like, I look good, kind of a thing. It was this really beautiful also transformation for myself and all my own self-love, to just be like, okay, this is how I get to connect now with the world.
Right. And I think it's another part of your transformation. You're taking that thing that you were afraid of your son being, which is, I think, is pretty common,
Yeah.
when your child is labeled special needs or just special, they're put in a separate classroom away from their peers, and they have their own special teachers, and it's that separation and the ridicule, and
Yeah.
it's that fear that you had. You were afraid of what happened to you, what happened to your child, and you just
Yeah.
decided, if this is something that he needs, what am I afraid of, and you decided to kind of, you dived into it, you tapped into, you looked fear in the eye and said, "Screw you."
Yep, that's right. I'm done with you. You're not bringing anything to me. So yeah.
Right, and I
Yeah.
and with podcasting, and you're constantly talking about it and putting it out there, and I'm assuming, I don't know if you have guests on your show, but you, I
Yeah.
mean, you, I'm assuming, I don't know, but you talk to other
Yes.
people with similar experience,
260 interviews later.
right? And it's sort of like you're kind of talking yourself over and over and over and over again, and that's another, it's the more that you face it, the more that you embrace it.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like to me.
And the more you grow too, the more, people you talk to, you learn their perspectives and you see all these different perspectives. And then especially when you can do it globally and you can see, oh my gosh, how sad that in some countries it's still looked at maybe as a curse in some communities, or, and things like that, where those communities and people really need the support and education to understand that they're still beautiful humans, and that's not the case, and there is ways to show up for them and to teach your community about grace and love and inclusion.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now with your daughter now, do you, so um when you had your daughter, were you just as afraid, or were
Yeah.
you like, let's do it?
Oh my
Let's
gosh, I think we got his diagnosis when I was pregnant with her. So yes, I just didn't understand or have any knowledge of if if it was genetic or if it was environmentally, what had been the cause basically at the beginning. And so now I know it's definitely genetic, and I love that. I love that they're like us. I'd rather be like them and have them like us so that we can support each other that way. But it definitely was a scary process. And when she was, 1 years old and trying on every shoe and walking in high heels like she owned the place. Like it was clear that she was a different person than he was 100%. She was super chatty and just very confident and uh, brave, but she had the different levels of understanding safety and understanding social cues, where he still doesn't to this day have that as much comprehension of those things. And she's 11. The reason we had her tested, kind of interesting story about that too, is that she's dyslexic. And in first and second grade, I had told the teachers, I think she's dyslexic. And they said, oh no, she's so smart. She's just this bright. She's always asking questions. Like, there's just no way she's not dyslexic. But when COVID happened and I had to bring her home and homeschool her, and the poor child is writing backwards, I was like, shame on you, teachers. Like, she could have been getting so much help in the last 2 years when I brought this to your attention, but you refused to have her tested because of your lack of understanding and education about dyslexia. But clearly she's writing backwards. And so with my son's online school that we had so much success with, I enrolled her, and the teacher was like, yep, we'll get her help right away. We'll get a psychologist down there right now. All of these things happened. And when he came to do the testing, we told him about, our family and things like that. And at that time, my son and my husband had my son had a diagnosis. My husband had his own personal understandings, if you will. And then he said to us after the testing, well, dyslexia, ADHD, autism. And we both looked at each other like, oh my gosh, kind of a thing. And got in the car and drove home. And my husband and I said, well, should we make her a cake? Like, should we do this, like, celebrate, let's welcome to the autism family kind of a thing. And yeah, it was cute. But we now see how, she's gotten so much more help for her dyslexia. She's improved so much in her reading and writing. It's fantastic. If she wouldn't have gotten that, she'd still be struggling today, and nobody would have given her the support she needed and deserved to have. And so I'm so grateful that she had that, because we were able to then enter the charter school that she goes to now and bring her IEP, which is an individual education plan, to her school and accommodate those needs that she had, whether it be sitting closer to the chalkboard, having extra time on a test to read the questions and answer them, being able to voice text like reports and things like that into digital form. They all turn it in digitally. So does she have to write it out on a piece of paper if she's going to struggle and take 3 days to do it when it takes 30 minutes to voice text it? Like it's they want to see what they understand. So I prompt them to, well, then give her the chance to show you what she understands in a way that's best for her. And that's what they should be doing for all children, is letting them show up in the best form that they can, whether that be through drawing or like this voice texting, things like that. I think that there's nowadays so many great tools we can offer our kids to help them with that struggle.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, with technology has definitely exploded, I would say, um for I don't know, the special needs community, visually impaired, um any kind of I don't know the word for it, but
Like assistive
assisting
technology
technology.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that has exploded, I think, in maybe in the past, probably since the pandemic started, but
Mhm.
uh maybe in the past 3 to 5 years, it's definitely exploded, and there's a lot more out there now. And I
Yeah.
think it's a whole new world,
It really
pretty
is.
much. Yeah.
And when we give the ability to communicate to someone who's non speaking and they have their chance to show up in the world and show us all that they can do and all of the knowledge and understanding that they have, it takes you back. You take a step back and realize, like, wow, first of all, I take speaking for granted every moment that I do it, because I'm in April going to be, I'm creating and hosting an international autism summit where I'm bringing together autistics from other countries to tell their stories about how their living experience in that country is. And my keynote speaker is a non speaking individual who will be translated through his speaking device and a translator because he's German. So, in that process, I mean, I'm so proud to have him be a part of this because he's written children's books. He has written symphonies that they've like done in, and he's only in his early 20s. He's a very young man, and he has an incredible story. He was an orphan from Romania that moved to Germany. Just like, wow, the people, when you reach out and try to find like the most incredible people, sometimes you won't believe the people that you get, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And like the more you dive into it, the more that you learn, and the more that I guess, the more comfortable you become.
Yeah. The better you can be, right? Just
Absolutely.
always trying to be better. Absolutely. Oh, that's so
Yeah.
great.
All right. Well, we're having a lot of fun, but we're going to start to wind things down. So I like to ask my guests any words of wisdom that you'd like to share. So, what any words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah. I think two things really come to mind. Number one is all behavior is communication. And it's up to us, especially as parents, to look intently, to listen in very with action and with intent, listen very carefully and see what our children are communicating with us through their behaviors, because behavior isn't about being bad or being good. It's about not understanding, not knowing, or sometimes understanding and knowing how to communicate. And so we really need to be careful of how we judge or move through the world with those ideas that behavior isn't a form of communication, because that's exactly what it is. The second thing is a quote that we say, and that is, a little bit of knowledge will turn fear into understanding. And that kind of sums up exactly what we talked about, is that there was a lot of fear at the beginning, and we were running with that for a while, but more knowledge we gained, the easier it was. And now the better we can understand what we need to do in the future.
Awesome, awesome. And something just a question just came to me. So after you found out about your son's diagnosis, how did your family react?
Yeah, great question. You know, it turned into something very isolating. Our family members didn't understand. They weren't open to learning or to understanding at the time. Many of them have since then, kind of shed that idea that we were being, not great parents, or that the children just would grow out of it, or they would are misbehaving. And that took a little bit of time, I would say. But we definitely, after having to leave several family parties and kind of come to understand that maybe our space in the general outside of our family wasn't where we belong, and that within our home, in our confines of our own walls, we could be ourselves. We could support each other in the way that we saw necessary, and saw in loving ways that others saw as misbehaving or us not disciplining enough. So instead of feeling like we constantly needed to be judged, we probably um, removed ourselves, or really drew back from a lot. And so we're now today are only close with maybe two or three other family members outside of all of the rest of the family that we both have. But I think that's just kind of the way of the world. And we either decide that we're going to be a part of something loving, or we're going to stay in other relationships that might not be so healthy. So I think at that point, especially when you're looking out for a child who can't communicate their comfortability levels or their ideas of safety, then it's best to just not put them in any type of harm's way, or being yelled at by someone that doesn't understand them. But yeah, so I think that it did come with a lot of isolation. But we've now, like I said, in starting my Facebook groups, the Autism Advocate Support Group, which started out as a place where I could invite people from my neighborhood to talk about autism, now is globally, 1,400 members, word of mouth, which is crazy to me. So it's wonderful that now this community has grown so much, and it is so beautiful and supportive. And um, yeah, it's become a place, the SJ Child Show, and the autism events that I've held, and the friends and connections that I've made with other self advocates and other parent advocates has been so beautiful, that I just wouldn't change any of it for the world.
Fabulous, fabulous. And so pretty much what you didn't find in your own family, unfortunately, you found through Facebook groups, other community events, and finding it within your social circle, so to
Yeah,
speak.
created it myself. Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes that's what you got to do. It's family won't always support, but it's what you need, and so you
Mm.
didn't give up, and you found what you needed some other way.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. All right, now it is promo time. All right, so let's get your information up here. All right, you guys. So, Sara Bradford, you can find her all over the place. So, check out her website. It is sjchilds.org. So I encourage you to go to her website to learn about her and her services. She also has two Facebook pages. One is SJ Child Show, and the other one is SJ Childs LLC. So I encourage you to go to both of those pages and follow. She also has two Facebook groups. So I encourage you to join those Facebook groups. I am in one of them. It is Podcasting Network Group. So for you podcasters out there, you want to connect with other podcasters, I encourage you to join that group. And the other one is called Autism Advocate Support Group. So I encourage you to join that one as well. She is on Instagram, SJ Childs LLC. She's also on TikTok and Patreon, SJ Child. She's also on YouTube, the SJ Child Show. So all of this information is on the screen right now, but it'll also be in the description. So whether you are watching this on video or you're listening to this on a podcast, all this information is available to you. And I encourage you to take advantage of all of that information. Is there anything you want to share about your business, Sara, while I have you
Oh,
here?
well, like I said, right now I'm working on the International Global Autism Summit next April 2024. So if you go to my website or to any of the places, you'll be able to find out more information about that event coming up. Also, our uh, nonprofit, which we haven't unveiled yet, if you will. So when that process is underway, we'll be able to get notifications about that as well. If you missed any of those places, you can simply go to Google and Google SJ Childs, and pages will come up. Wonderful interviews of myself and other people on my show. So, yeah, thank you so much for having me today, Gabrielle. This has just been a wonderful, wonderful hour.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. All right. I want to make sure we get this. All right. So you have a podcast called the SJ Child Show. We've mentioned it a few times today. So you can listen to it wherever you get your podcast. So Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, wherever you get your podcasts, you could listen and subscribe to her show. It is called the SJ Child Show. So I encourage you guys to listen to her podcast as well. And I don't have it, but you mentioned you have a book. Tell us about your book.
I have 7 books. Yeah, you can go to Amazon to find those. Again, you can look up SJ Childs. You can go to my website. They're on the website. There are books about autism. They are children's books. There's 2 autism books, a dyslexia book, Down syndrome, anxiety, physical differences, and then my favorite that I love to share and show off right behind me. I know for viewers, not listeners, but the ABC book. My daughter, when she was 8 years old, wanted to be a part of the process of the books. And so she illustrated her own ABC book at the age of 8. So we have this beautifully illustrated children's book for kids. So they're all, like I said, on my website, on Amazon, or anywhere you buy books online. And yeah, would love to get them to you and to your school or to your grandkids, whatever. It's a wonderful way to start to open the discussion about neurodiversity, about physical differences, and about how to support families and communities that deserve that.
Beautiful, beautiful. So there you have it. So her books, just look up SJ Childs. She has a whole, what's it called? Is it bibliography? I, she
Oh,
has an assortment.
yeah, something like that, right?
Assortment of
An
books. I'm like,
author page.
but she, she has a whole collection of books. Just look up SJ Childs, and it will pop up. So I encourage you guys to check out Amazon or wherever you get your books. Look for those books and purchase those books as well. All right. Well, Sara, thank you again for coming on Hot
Thank you.
Topics.
I had a great time. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. All right, you guys. So that is it. We have reached the conclusion of yet another episode. Thank you for joining me again on Hot Topics. So I'm going to take a moment to remind you guys that Hot Topics is part of my tutoring company, A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. So if you are, if you or your child, they need academic assistance, they need one on one tutoring, especially if you have a child with a learning disability, for example, because, that's the highlight of the show, please reach out to us. Our website is www.astepaheadtutoringservices.com. We provide one on one tutoring, test prep, college counseling, editing and proofreading. So, and a variety of workshops as well. So, I encourage you to check us out and take advantage of our services. You can also find us on social media, and I encourage you to find us on social media and follow us as well. So, just type in A Step Ahead Tutoring Services and we will pop up. We're on most of the platforms, not all, but we're on most of it. So make sure you check us out and follow us as well. Again, make sure A Step Ahead Tutoring Services and we will pop up. So I encourage you to follow us on social media as well. And I'm going to just repeat the website one more time, www.astepahead tutoring services. So if you are in need of any kind, or your child in need of any like homework assistance, time management, study skills, any of that, check us out and get a tutor from us today. And I also want to encourage you guys, if you're watching this on video or you're listening to this on a podcast, leave a comment. Leave a comment in the comment section or in the comment thread. I also encourage you to give us a rating. It helps us out a lot. It helps the bots find us. So please leave a comment in the comment section or in the comment thread. Let us know your thoughts about this episode. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Love it, hate it, whatever it is. Just put a note below and give us your thoughts as well. All right, you guys. So thank you again for joining me on Hot Topics. I look forward to you joining me on the next episode. Thank you again, you guys. And now I am signing off. Bye, guys.